lied and used fake documents to obtain the interview with my mother, made lurid and false claims about the royal family, which played on her fear.
It's very hard to keep up, particularly when you try to dash about the country as well.
Behind palace walls, Princess Diana's death never truly rested. Hidden journals, sealed tapes, and decades of silence now collide as Prince William steps toward forbidden truth. What was buried to protect the monarchy may soon resurface, threatening King Charles, Camilla, and royal family history forever. The night Princess Diana died, the world was told it was a tragic accident, a sudden death in a Paris tunnel. Flashing cameras, shock, grief. Flowers piled outside the palace gates as the public mourned the woman they called the People's Princess. But grief never fades when silence follows. Inside the royal family, something unspoken settled into the walls of the palace, heavy and permanent. For Prince William, Diana's death was not just history. It was a wound that never fully healed. He grew up carrying her memory like a quiet promise, honoring her compassion, her warmth, her ability to make people feel seen. Yet as the years passed, William sensed there were secrets no one wanted to name. The monarchy moved forward, polished and controlled, while Diana's voice slowly faded from public speeches and official history. What few outside the palace understood was that Diana had not gone quietly. In the months before her death, she had written relentlessly. Her journal became a refuge, filled with grief, fear, and clarity. Alongside it were tapes recorded late at night, Diana's voice soft but resolute, meant only for her sons. These were not political statements. They were final wishes, confessions of pain, and warnings about life inside the royal family. Those journals and tapes never reached William. They were sealed away, locked behind protocol, tradition, and silence. According to those who once worked within the palace, King Charles made the decision himself. Not out of cruelty, but control. The monarchy was fragile then. Public support was thin. Diana was adored, and anything that amplified her truth risked destabilizing the institution. So the truth was buried, and with it, a son's right to hear, his mother's final words. Years later, William's discovery was not dramatic. No grand reveal. Just a quiet moment inside a restricted palace archive, surrounded by documents that smelled of dust and time. A journal with familiar handwriting, tapes labeled in Diana's careful script. In seconds, William's understanding of his mother's death fractured. This was not rumor. This was her voice, her truth. Grief returned with force. Not the grief of a child at a funeral, but the grief of a man realizing he had been protected from the very thing he needed most. As William listened and read, betrayal crept in. These secrets were not hidden by strangers or tabloids. They were hidden by his own father. The silence suddenly had a shape, and it hurt. The confrontation with King Charles was inevitable. Private. Intense. Stripped of titles and ceremony, William did not shout at first. He asked why. Why the journal? Why the tapes? Why decades of silence? Charles spoke of duty, of shielding his sons, of preserving the monarchy during its most unstable chapter. But to William, it sounded like justification, not protection. And then there was Camilla. Her presence lingered in Diana's words, in memories of betrayal and emotional isolation. Diana had felt replaced long before her death. Now Camilla stood as queen, while Diana's voice remained hidden. For William, this was not about blame alone. It was about legacy. Who gets remembered? Who gets erased? Kate Middleton stood beside him through it all, steady and quiet, watching the weight reshape the man she loved. Together they understood what this moment meant. The truth was no longer buried. The silence was cracking. And William now stood between loyalty to the monarchy and loyalty to his mother's legacy. The decision forming inside him would not just reopen history. It would change the future of the royal family, whether the palace was ready or not. The truth didn't stay contained for long. Inside the palace, silence has a way of echoing. Once Prince William began asking questions, doors that had been closed for decades started to tremble. Staff noticed the change immediately. His routine shifted. Meetings were postponed. Long walks replaced public appearances. Behind closed doors, William wasn't acting like the future king of the monarchy. He was acting like a son who had lost his mother all over again. The journal hit him first. Page after page of Princess Diana's handwriting pulled him backward in time. She wrote about loneliness inside the palace, about feeling watched but never heard. She wrote about her marriage unraveling, about how love turned into obligation, and how silence became a weapon. Most painfully, she wrote about her sons, about William's sensitivity, about her fear that the royal family would teach them duty before humanity. The tapes were worse. Hearing her voice broke something open. This wasn't a distant memory or a photograph in a frame. This was Diana breathing, pausing, choosing her words carefully. She spoke about final wishes, about wanting her sons to know who she really was, beyond headlines. She spoke about Camilla, not with anger but with heartbreak, about realizing there were 3 people in her marriage long before the world admitted it. William sat alone in his private study, the palace around him silent, listening to the truth that had been denied to him for most of his life. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't speculation. These were secrets hidden in plain sight. And once he heard them, he couldn't unhear them. The confrontation with King Charles came days later. No advisors, no aides, just father and son. The air between them was heavy with history. William didn't accuse at first. He asked, "Why were the journal and tapes sealed? Why was he never told? Why did silence matter more than a grieving child?" Charles answered carefully. He spoke of the public, of the monarchy under pressure, of fear. He said releasing Diana's words would have destroyed what little stability remained after her death. He said he thought he was protecting his sons from pain. But protection, William realized, had come at a cost. It stole his chance to heal. It stole his right to know his mother fully. Voices rose, emotions spilled, years of unspoken grief surfaced in minutes. William demanded to know who else was involved, who made the final call. Charles hesitated. That hesitation said more than words ever could. When William left the room, something fundamental had changed. Trust had fractured. Camilla's name hovered uncomfortably in the aftermath. Diana's journal did not paint her as a villain, but it made her role undeniable. The affair wasn't just personal betrayal. It shaped the emotional collapse of Diana's world. And now, Camilla stood at the center of the monarchy, while Diana's truth remained buried. Kate Middleton saw the toll immediately. She stayed close, listening more than speaking, watching William wrestle with the weight of history. She believed the truth mattered, not for scandal, but for legacy. Diana had been silenced once. Letting that happen again felt unforgivable. Outside, the palace, whispers began to spread. A leak here, a hint there. The public sensed something stirring. Online conversations exploded with phrases like Princess Diana's secrets and hidden royal tapes. People asked why the monarchy had gone quiet again. Silence, once a shield, was now a spotlight. William felt the pressure building from all sides. The royal family expected restraint. The public demanded truth. His mother's voice waited patiently, preserved in ink and sound. Releasing it could fracture the monarchy. Keeping it buried could fracture him. Late one night, William sat alone, the journal open, the tapes beside him. The decision was no longer theoretical, it was personal, and whatever he chose next would ripple through the palace, the public, and royal history itself. By the time the sun rose over the palace, Prince William already knew one thing for certain. There was no going back to who he was before the truth. The journal and tapes had changed him, not loudly, not suddenly, but deeply. Like a crack spreading through stone, invisible at first, impossible to stop. As days passed, the weight of Princess Diana's final wishes grew heavier. William began to see his childhood through a new lens. Moments that once felt confusing now made sense. Her sadness, her urgency, her need to be heard. The monarchy had not just failed Diana in life. It had controlled her voice in death. What disturbed William most was not the pain in her words, but the clarity. Diana knew exactly what kind of system she was trapped in. She wrote about the palace as a machine that consumed emotion and rewarded silence. She feared that one day her sons would be forced to choose between truth and duty. Reading those words now felt almost prophetic. Behind the scenes, tension spread through the royal family. Senior aides noticed how closely William guarded the materials. Requests were made, politely at first, to return the journal to the archives. Suggestions followed. Perhaps this was too emotional. Perhaps it was better left untouched. William refused, calmly, firmly. These were not historical documents to him. They were his mother. Camilla felt the shift as well. Conversations grew shorter. The warmth that once existed between her and William cooled into formality. Diana's words had not accused, but they had exposed wounds that never healed. Camilla understood what might happen if those tapes were ever heard by the public. Her place in the monarchy, already fragile in the eyes of many, could be reshaped overnight. Kate Middleton watched carefully. She saw how grief turned into resolve. William wasn't seeking revenge. He wasn't chasing scandal. He was searching for balance between legacy and truth. Kate encouraged him to think beyond the immediate fallout. What kind of monarchy would their children inherit? One built on silence or one capable of honesty? Meanwhile, public curiosity intensified. Articles speculated about Princess Diana's secrets. Comment sections filled with demands for transparency. The palace issued no statements. That silence only fueled suspicion. The public had learned long ago that when the royal family says, "Nothing," something is wrong. William reached out to Harry quietly. No cameras, no announcements, just a message. A simple request to talk. For years, distance and resentment had defined their relationship. But Diana's voice had a way of cutting through old divisions. If there was anyone else who deserved to hear her final words, it was her younger son. Inside the palace, fear crept in, not fear of scandal, but fear of precedent. If William broke tradition now, what would that mean for the monarchy's future? The crown had survived by controlling narrative, by choosing when history was allowed to speak. William represented something different, a generation shaped by loss, not entitlement. Late one evening, William stood alone, looking out across the palace grounds. The journal rested open behind him. The tapes waited nearby. Diana's voice was no longer trapped in the past. It was alive in his hands, pressing him toward a choice no heir had ever faced so openly. Release the truth and risk shaking the monarchy to its core, or remain silent and become another link in the chain that silenced her. The palace slept, unaware that history was holding its breath. The pressure finally spilled beyond the palace walls. What began as whispers hardened into headlines. Phrases like hidden royal tapes and Princess Diana secrets flooded the public space. Commentators questioned the monarchy's silence. Supporters demanded truth. Critics sensed weakness, and at the center of it all stood Prince William, carrying a legacy heavier than any crown. Inside the royal family, the mood shifted from caution to alarm. Emergency meetings took place behind closed doors. Advisors warned of reputational damage, of constitutional consequences, of public trust eroding if Diana's words were released. The message was clear. Silence had always protected the monarchy. Breaking it now could unravel decades of carefully managed history. But William no longer saw silence as protection. He saw it as inheritance. One passed down, generation after generation, at the cost of truth. Diana's journal sat open on his desk, her handwriting intimate and unmistakable. She had written about the danger of choosing image over honesty, about how the palace rewarded obedience and punished vulnerability, about how love was often sacrificed for appearance. King Charles felt the shift too. His conversations with William grew tense, measured, cautious. He urged patience. He warned that the public did not need every truth, that some things were better, left in the past. But William heard something else beneath his father's words. Fear, not just of scandal, but of losing control over a story long settled. Camilla remained quiet, but her presence was impossible to ignore. Diana's words had reawakened old wounds the monarchy believed time had healed. Public sentiment, once softened, hardened again. Comparisons resurfaced. Sympathy returned to Diana. Camilla's role, long defended by the palace, faced renewed scrutiny. The silence surrounding her only intensified it. Kate Middleton became William's steady ground. She reminded him that truth didn't have to be cruel to be honest, that releasing Diana's final wishes didn't mean destroying the monarchy, but redefining it. Kate believed people could handle complexity, that the public could respect a royal family brave enough to confront its own history. As the days passed, William felt the divide sharpen. On one side stood tradition, expectation, and the crown. On the other stood a mother's voice, preserved in ink and sound, waiting to be heard. The journal and tapes weren't weapons, they were testimony. And testimony demanded a witness. William drafted statements he never released. He listened to the tapes again, focusing not on pain, but intention. Diana hadn't wanted revenge. She wanted understanding. She wanted her sons to grow up knowing the truth, even if that truth was uncomfortable. Especially if it was uncomfortable. The public waited. Social media buzzed with theories and demands. Some believed William would fall in line, as heirs always. Others believed he was different. That grief had shaped him into someone willing to risk everything for honesty. Late one night, inside the quiet palace, William closed the journal and placed the tapes beside it. He wasn't angry anymore. He was clear. The monarchy had taught him duty. Diana had taught him compassion. Now those two lessons stood in direct conflict. The decision was no longer about exposure. It was about legacy, about what kind of king he would become, about whether history would remember him as the man who protected silence, or the one who finally let the truth speak. And as dawn approached, one thing became certain. Whatever William chose next would change the royal family. Forever. The moment Prince William realized there would be no safe outcome, everything shifted. This was no longer about palace strategy or royal family optics. It was about a son deciding whether his mother's truth deserved daylight. Princess Diana had lived under scrutiny, but she had died unheard. William understood now that silence had been the final betrayal. He imagined the impact. The public hearing Diana's voice again, the journal revealing her final wishes. The monarchy forced to confront its own history, not as a polished narrative, but as a human story marked by grief, control, and loss. He knew King Charles feared that moment, not because it would destroy the crown overnight, but because it would expose how fragile it truly was. William also understood the cost to himself. Releasing the truth could permanently fracture his relationship with his father. It could deepen tension around Camilla. It could divide the royal family in ways that might never heal. But keeping Diana's voice locked away meant becoming complicit in the same silence that haunted him since her death. Kate Middleton stood beside him as he weighed the final choice. She reminded him that history doesn't only judge outcomes, it judges courage. Diana had believed the monarchy could evolve, that compassion could exist alongside duty. William realized this might be the moment that belief was tested. The palace waited. Advisors waited. The public waited. Every hour of silence only sharpened attention. Searches surged. Prince William reveals. Princess Diana secrets. Hidden royal tapes. The world sensed a reckoning coming, even if it didn't yet know its shape. William returned to the journal one last time. Diana had written about legacy, not as titles or crowns, but as truth passed from one generation to the next. She wanted her sons to be men before they were princes, to choose humanity over image. That was the legacy she left him. As the future of the monarchy hung in the balance, William made his decision quietly. No announcement, no press release, just resolve. Whether the truth emerged fully or in fragments, Diana would no longer be erased. Her voice would matter, Her story would live. The crown has survived wars, scandal, exile, and death. But this moment is different, because this threat doesn't come from outside the palace. It comes from within. From a son, a mother, and a truth that refuse to stay buried. And now the question isn't whether Princess Diana's voice will change history. It's whether the monarchy is strong enough to survive hearing it. If you believe Diana's truth deserves to be heard, let your voice be part of the conversation. Like this video, share it with others who still question the silence, and subscribe for more untold royal family stories that history never wanted you to hear.